Love can survive almost anything except the small lie that grows in the dark. I thought I knew the sound of my husband sleeping. 9 years of marriage teaches you things like that. The rhythm of his breathing, the way he shifted at 3 a.m., the soft grunt when he rolled onto his side. Our bedroom had a particular quality of stillness when we were both in it, a kind of shared silence that felt safe. The house made its own noises, the refrigerator humming downstairs, the loose floorboard by the bathroom, the radiator ticking as it cooled. But underneath all of that, there was us. Our presence together created something I never thought about until it was gone. It was March when Ryan started sleeping on the couch. He said it was his back. Lower lumbar, he explained, gesturing vaguely at the base of his spine. The mattress was too soft, or maybe too firm. He wasn't sure. What he was sure about was that he couldn't sleep through the night anymore, and he didn't want to keep me awake with all his tossing. I worked early shifts at the hospital, usually leaving the house by 5:30 a.m., and he knew how much I needed those hours of uninterrupted rest. Just until we figure out what's wrong, he said, standing in the doorway with a pillow tucked under his arm. I'll make an appointment with that chiropractor on Elm Street. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? People have back pain. Mattresses wear out. He worked from home, sitting in that same desk chair for 8 hours a day, hunched over his laptop in our converted spare room. It made sense. I even felt guilty, like somehow our bed had failed him, like I should have noticed sooner that he was in pain. The first few nights, I'd come home from my shift and find him still on the couch, the TV playing some early morning news program, his body curled under the gray blanket we kept folded over the armrest. He looked uncomfortable, his neck bent at an odd angle, one leg hanging off the edge. I'd touch his shoulder gently, and he'd wake with a start, blinking up at me like he'd forgotten where he was. How'd you sleep? I'd ask. Better, he'd say. Definitely better. I started researching mattresses, memory foam versus hybrid, firmness ratings, spinal alignment. I bookmarked articles about posture and stretching exercises for lower back pain. I asked the physical therapist at work what she recommended, and she gave me a printout of stretches with little stick figure diagrams. I left it on Ryan's desk with a post-it note that said, "Love you. Try these." He texted me during my lunch break. "Thanks, babe. Will do." But the appointments with the chiropractor never materialized. When I asked about it, he'd wave his hand dismissively and say he'd been meaning to call, that work had been crazy, that he'd get to it. Meanwhile, the couch became his regular spot. 2 nights a week turned into 3, then 4. By April, he was sleeping there more often than not. I told myself it didn't matter. Couples went through phases. Maybe this was just temporary, a weird adjustment period while we figured out the mattress situation. We still had dinner together most nights, still watched our shows, still kissed goodbye in the mornings when I left for work. He still asked about my day, still laughed at my stories about difficult patients and impossible doctors. Everything else was the same, except it wasn't. There were small things, little shifts I couldn't quite name. The way he'd started putting his phone face down on the table, the way he'd begun showering at night instead of in the morning, the way he'd say, "I love you," with the same inflection every time, like a line he'd memorized instead of a feeling he was expressing. But I was tired. Night shifts mess with your body in ways that are hard to describe. You sleep when the sun is up, eat meals at the wrong times, exist in a state of perpetual jet lag without ever leaving your time zone. Everything feels slightly off-kilter, including your ability to trust your own instincts. So when I'd noticed something strange, a receipt for gas from a station across town, a shirt I didn't recognize in the laundry, I'd dismiss it. I was overworked. I was overthinking. I was inventing problems where none existed. The house smelled different in those weeks. Or maybe I was just noticing it more. There was his cologne, which he'd started wearing even on days he didn't leave the house. There was the lingering scent of the lavender detergent I used on the couch cushions, trying to make his makeshift bed more comfortable. There was coffee brewing at odd hours, and sometimes, when I came home in the afternoon, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine. "Did someone come over?" I asked once. He looked up from his laptop, confused. "What?" "It smells like perfume." He shrugged. "Maybe it's from outside? Mrs. Chen next door wears that floral stuff." It was a reasonable explanation. Mrs. Chen did wear strong perfume. I let it go. In May, I woke at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. The house was dark, except for the blue glow of the cable box in the living room. I expected to hear the TV, the usual background noise of whatever late-night program Ryan had fallen asleep to. But the house was silent, completely, utterly silent. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting my eyes adjust. Then I walked to the living room. The couch was empty. The gray blanket was folded neatly over the armrest, the pillow propped against the side cushion. The TV was off. And Ryan's shoes, the slip-on Vans he wore for quick trips to the mailbox or the garage, were gone from their spot by the door. My heart did something strange. Not a skip exactly. More like a stutter, a moment where it forgot what it was supposed to be doing. I checked the driveway. His car was gone. I stood at the window in my pajamas, arms crossed against the chill, and stared at the empty space where his Civic should have been. The streetlight cast an orange glow over the pavement. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The neighbor's motion sensor light clicked on, illuminating their front porch for 30 seconds before plunging it back into darkness. He came home at 3:15. I heard the garage door rumble open, heard his footsteps in the kitchen, heard the soft creak of the living room floorboards. I was back in bed by then, lying perfectly still, my eyes closed, my breathing slow and measured. I heard him pause outside our bedroom door. Then he moved on to the couch. In the morning, I asked where he'd been. "What do you mean?" He was making coffee, his back to me. "Last night. I got up to use the bathroom and you weren't here." He turned, coffee pot in hand, his expression surprised but not concerned. "Oh, yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I went for a drive. Sometimes that helps, just driving around, clearing my head." At 2 a.m? Is that when it was? He poured coffee into his favorite mug, the chipped blue one I'd bought him in Portland. "I didn't really check the time. Sorry if I worried you." "You didn't worry me," I lied. He smiled, relieved. "Good, because it's really not a big deal, just a weird insomnia thing." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe him so badly that I almost succeeded. But that night at work, during a quiet moment at the nurse's station, I found myself staring at nothing, replaying the conversation, searching for the truth hidden inside it. My colleague Maria asked if I was okay, and I said yes automatically, the way you do when the real answer is too complicated to say out loud. After that night, I started paying attention differently. I noticed that on the nights he slept on the couch, his side of the bed would be cold when I touched it in the morning. Not just cool, but genuinely cold, like no one had been there in hours. I noticed that the pillow on the couch never had the deep impression that comes from actual sleep. Just a slight dent, like someone had laid their head there briefly before leaving. I noticed that his car's mileage was climbing faster than it should for someone who only drove to the grocery store and back. I started checking. Not obsessively, not at first. But when he left his phone on the counter while he showered, I'd look at it. It was always locked. When he mentioned a conference call, I'd note the time, and later I'd wonder why his office door had been closed for 3 hours instead of 1. When he said he'd gone to the gym, I'd touch his gym bag and find it cold, the towel inside dry and perfectly folded. The evidence accumulated slowly, like water filling a bathtub, one drop at a time. Individually, each observation could be explained away. Collectively, they formed a pattern I didn't want to see. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was projecting my exhaustion onto our marriage. I told myself that trust meant giving him the benefit of the doubt, even when doubt was the only thing I had. But then came the evening, late June, when I decided to stop telling myself anything at all. It was a Thursday. I'd worked the day shift, gotten home at 4:30, made dinner, chicken stir-fry with the snap peas he liked. We ate together at the kitchen table, talking about his project deadline and my new patient assignment. He was animated, describing some coding problem he'd solved, using his hands to gesture in that way he did when he was excited about his work. For a moment, it felt like us again, like the us we used to be. After dinner, I said I was exhausted and going to bed early. He kissed my forehead and said he'd probably stay up a bit, maybe watch something. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, changed into my pajamas, but I didn't get into bed. Instead, I sat on the floor in the dark, leaning against the wall, and I waited. At 11:30, I heard him moving around downstairs. The living room TV clicked off. I heard his footsteps, heard him using the bathroom, heard him padding back to the couch. Then, silence. I waited 30 more minutes. At midnight, I heard it. The soft jingle of keys, the careful click of the front door, the distinctive rumble of the garage door opening. I moved to the window and watched his taillights disappear down the street. I didn't think, I just moved. I pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, grabbed my car keys, and followed him. He drove carefully, using his turn signal, stopping fully at stop signs, like someone who didn't want to attract attention. I stayed 3 cars back, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. We drove through our neighborhood, past the elementary school, past the 24-hour CVS where we bought cold medicine and birthday cards. Then he turned onto Riverside Drive, heading toward the older part of town where the houses had bigger yards and the trees grew thick enough to block the streetlights. He pulled into a driveway on Ashford Lane. The house was small, cream-colored with dark blue shutters. There was a light on in the front window. Before he'd even turned off his engine, the front door opened and she stepped out onto the porch. I parked 2 houses down, my headlights off, my breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with long dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, the kind of outfit you wear when you're comfortable, when you're home. She smiled when she saw him. Not the polite smile you give a friend, the real one, the one that lights up your whole face. He climbed the porch steps and hugged her. It was the kind of hug that lasted too long, the kind where you bury your face in someone's neck and breathe them in. Then they went inside together, and the door closed behind them. I sat in my car for an hour, maybe longer, I don't really remember. At some point, the light in the living room went off, and another light appeared in what I assumed was a bedroom. I thought about getting out of my car, thought about walking up to that door and knocking. I thought about all the things I could say, all the ways I could shatter that warm, lit-up house the way mine had just been shattered. But I didn't. I just drove home. Ryan came back at 3 a.m. I heard him, just like before, trying to be quiet, trying not to wake the wife he thought was sleeping peacefully upstairs. I lay in our bed, his side still cold, always cold, and listened to him settle onto the couch. In the morning I made coffee. He came into the kitchen, rumpled and yawning, and reached for the blue mug. "How'd you sleep?" I asked. "Not great," he said. "This back thing is really killing me." "Is it?" Something in my voice made him look up. We stood there in our kitchen, the coffee pot burbling between us, and everything that was about to be said lived in the silence first. "I followed you last night," I said. His face did something complicated. Not surprise exactly, something worse. Relief, maybe. Like he'd been carrying something heavy and had finally been given permission to set it down. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's it? Okay?" He set the mug down carefully on the counter. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to explain. I want you to tell me who she is and how long this has been happening and why you've been pretending to sleep on our goddamn couch instead of just telling me the truth." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, almost gentle. "Her name is Kelsey. We met at that coffee shop on 3rd Street, the one with the good Wi-Fi. I've been working there sometimes because the house felt too quiet. We started talking, and then we just kept talking." "How long?" 4 months. 4 months. While I'd been researching mattresses and printing out stretching exercises, while I'd been worried about his back and his sleep and his stress, 4 months of coming home to him on the couch, believing every word, trusting every explanation. "Do you love her?" I asked, and I was surprised by how calm I sounded, like I was asking what he wanted for dinner instead of whether our marriage was ending. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Sadness, maybe, or pity. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe. Do you love me?" The pause before he answered was the longest silence of my life. "I did," he said. "I do. But it's different now. You're always working, and I'm always home, and somewhere along the way, we stopped being us. We became 2 people who live in the same house and don't really see each other anymore. So this is my fault because I work night shifts?" No, that's not what I'm saying." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm saying we lost something, and I didn't know how to tell you that, so I just found it somewhere else." "Found what?" "Someone who sees me, who's excited when I walk in the door, who laughs at my jokes and wants to hear about my day, Who makes me feel like I matter? I made you feel like you matter, I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. You used to, he said gently. But somewhere between your shifts and my deadlines and the bills and the routine, we forgot how to do that for each other. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't defensive. He was just standing there, telling me the truth, and somehow that made it worse. Because he was right. Somewhere in the last year or two, we had stopped seeing each other. We'd become roommates who occasionally had sex and split the mortgage payment. But I'd been trying to fix that. I'd been planning a weekend away. I'd been thinking about suggesting couples counseling. I'd been working on us in my head, making all these plans for reconnection and renewal. I just hadn't gotten around to saying any of it out loud. What happens now? I asked. He looked at me with something like sorrow. I don't know. I guess that's up to both of us. Do you want to stay married? Another long pause. I don't know that either. I nodded. There was nothing else to do. I picked up my coffee, walked past him, and went upstairs. I called in sick to work, which I'd never done in 9 years. Then I lay down on my side of the bed, the warm side, the side that still held the shape of my body, and I stared at the ceiling until the light changed and afternoon bled into evening. Ryan slept in the guest room that night. Actually slept there. No pretense, no lies, just the honest absence of him, which somehow felt less lonely than the presence had been. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet. We moved around each other carefully, like two strangers sharing a bus seat. He made dinner sometimes. I made dinner sometimes. We ate in separate rooms. The couch sat empty now, the gray blanket still folded over the armrest, a monument to all the lies that had lived there. He didn't see her during those weeks, or at least he said he didn't. I chose to believe him because the alternative was exhausting. We talked about logistics, who would keep the house, how we'd split the savings account, whether we'd tell our families now or wait. Every conversation was calm and practical, like we were dissolving a business partnership instead of a marriage. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself replaying everything. Not just the last 4 months, but the last 9 years. Searching for the moment when we'd stopped being a we. Was it when I started taking extra shifts to save for the kitchen renovation? Was it when he started that big project and began working weekends? Was it when we stopped having sex regularly and neither of us seemed to mind? Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe we'd just grown comfortable and comfort had become complacency, and complacency had left room for someone else to walk in and offer him something we'd forgotten we were supposed to give each other. I didn't hate him. That was the strange part. I wanted to. I tried to, but mostly I just felt tired and sad and oddly grateful that the pretending was over. He moved out in August. Kelsey helped him pack. I was at work when they came, which was probably for the best. When I got home, his side of the closet was empty, his desk cleared, his blue mug gone from the dish rack. He'd left the mattress, which felt like an apology or maybe an insult. I couldn't decide which. We signed the papers in October. The mediator had a kind face and a soothing voice, like she did this every day, which she probably did. We sat across from each other at a conference table, signing our names over and over, initialing pages, dividing up a life. When it was done, we walked out to the parking lot together. The air smelled like autumn, that particular mix of wood smoke and dying leaves. Take care of yourself, he said. You too. We didn't hug. We just got into our separate cars and drove away in separate directions. I think about it sometimes, usually late at night when the house is dark and I'm the only one in it. I think about how love isn't just broken by catastrophe. Sometimes it's just worn down, slowly, quietly, until there's nothing left but two people who used to know each other. I've learned things. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with rage and drama. Sometimes it arrives on an ordinary Thursday, dressed in lies about lower back pain and uncomfortable mattresses. I've learned that people can hurt each other without meaning to, can drift apart while still sleeping in the same house. I've learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And we'd been practicing indifference for longer than either of us wanted to admit. The house is quieter now. Just one mug in the dish rack. Just one side of the bed, warm in the morning. The couch sits empty, the gray blanket folded and clean, and sometimes I sit there and try to remember what it felt like to trust someone completely, to not question every word, to believe that when someone said they were sleeping on the couch, they were actually sleeping on the couch. I started dating again recently, nothing serious. Coffee dates with men from apps, conversations that go nowhere, Goodnight kisses that feel like practicing a language I used to speak fluently. They ask about my last relationship, and I give them the short version. Married young, grew apart, divorced amicably. I don't tell them about the couch. I don't tell them about the night I followed him, or the morning in the kitchen when everything unraveled, or the way his relief at being caught was somehow worse than the lying itself. Because the truth is too complicated for a first date. The truth is that I loved him, and he loved me, and somehow that wasn't enough. The truth is that we both failed at something we'd promised to protect. The truth is that some nights I still reach across the bed in my half sleep, still expecting to find him there, and the absence is sharp enough to wake me fully. But mornings are easier now. I make my coffee in peace, drive to work without wondering where he is or who he's with. I've learned to be alone in the house without feeling lonely. I've learned that healing isn't linear, that some days I'm fine and some days I'm not, and both of those things can be true. Last month, I saw them at the grocery store. Ryan and Kelsey, standing in the produce section, debating over avocados. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting casually on his arm. He looked happy, relaxed, like someone who'd finally stopped carrying a secret. I turned down a different aisle before they saw me. Not because I was angry or hurt, just because I didn't need to interrupt their moment with the weight of our history. They'd built something new from the ruins of what we'd let crumble, and maybe that was okay. Maybe that's just how things work sometimes. I bought what I needed and drove home to my quiet house, to my bed that belongs only to me, to my evenings spent however I choose to spend them. And somewhere between the parking lot and my front door, I realized I was okay. Not healed maybe, not completely, but okay. Because the truth is this, he started sleeping on the couch to help his back, except he wasn't sleeping on the couch at all. He was building a new life, one midnight drive at a time, and I was lying in our bed believing him because that's what love does. It believes, until it can't anymore. And when I couldn't anymore, when the truth finally arrived in that cold kitchen on a random morning in June, it didn't destroy me. It just changed me, made me someone who checks the mileage, who trusts her instincts, who understands that sometimes love ends not with a bang, but with the sound of a garage door opening in the middle of the night. I sleep well now, better than I have in years. The bed is all mine, and there's something peaceful about that, something honest. I don't wake at 2 a.m. wondering where anyone is or what they're doing or whether the story I'm telling myself matches the truth. I just sleep, deep and dreamless, the way you do when you're finally done pretending.